God is good, and today guys, I'm going to be talking about Ashes of Creation. I'm going to do my best to, as quickly as possible, address all the key features and what this game is in a nutshell as I possibly can without getting too detailed and without this video going on for too long. So we're going to be covering it in high detail as quickly as possible. Now, before we begin, if you're new to the Nathan Napalm channel, please consider subscribing, especially if you're interested in MMORPGs. I do tend to cover more in-depth the ones with the classic old school feel, and of course CRPGs, RPGs, all that kind of thing. And a big shout out to the members of Napalm for keeping the lights on and keeping me in business. If you are interested in becoming a member of the Napalm and getting exclusive perks, please click the join button down below for more information. Now let's get started on Ashes of Creation. So this is a very hyped MMORPG. I want to open this up with the big factor that makes Ashes of Creation so much different than other MMORPGs. Most MMOs right now are trying to do something different. They're trying to evolve the MMORPG space, and the way Ashes of Creation is going about this is through their node system. The thing about the nodes is that there are nodes spread out across the map. As a matter of fact, they claim there are 103 node locations at the launch of the game, and 15 castle nodes. Castle nodes are leveled through questing by the owning guild or alliance guilds if there's more than one guild that owns that node. You can use caravans to move supplies, which rival guilds want to destroy those caravans to prevent from leveling up that castle and its dedicated nodes to that castle. So because the thing about the nodes as one levels up, others around it level down. So if your rival guilds will be owning nodes that begin touching on the nodes that you do, therefore it's in their best interest that you do not get to level up your node so that they can level up theirs, or so it doesn't take away from theirs, because that's what the node system is. It's something where people quest and do things, gather resources and things to build up that node, because it may start as a small little camp and slowly grow as that node levels up into a sprawling metropolis city. And of course, as it grows, you get more resources, more things you can do there, more crafting options, just everything you can think of, including more quests and more raids, more stuff to do for you and your guild, or your alliance of guilds that control that node. But what about the regular nodes? Let's talk a little bit about that. These are the ones where there's 103 of them on a server at launch, right? These are preset points in the world that change over time based upon player participation. So the entire world map is divided into different regions. Each region has multiple nodes. As that node levels up or advances, it changes the type of content that is within that surrounding area. So you do not create a node, but if you are part of the government for that specific node, then you can influence things like diplomacy, modifying building types, construction, and services within that node. Now, it gets even more complicated. There are 4 different node types. Let's talk about those. There is divine nodes. These are what I might call priest nodes. They're focused on faith and skill or equipment augments. Usually near these nodes there are priest NPCs from the very beginning, like level 1 of that node. Then there are economic nodes. This is influenced by merchants, trade, merchants, that kind of thing. So if you're interested in playing the supply and demand game, then the economic node type is the one you're going to want to find citizenship in, right? So trading goods, and that can be across the land or even across the sea. Hoarding income, purchasing things. And these nodes, government, is basically set upon by being bought and sold by citizens or players with the most money. We're talking about markets, exchange, auction houses, markets, and that type of thing. Next up, we have the military nodes. So this is like for guards, for combat, and class training. Here, guard NPCs are present from the very first stage of development. These enable things like bounty hunters, which is a type title, something you can get through a quest and become a bounty hunter. Bounty hunters do things like being able to reveal corrupted players on the map, and we're gonna get to what a corrupted player is in just a minute, so we don't hop down too many rabbit holes at once. But basically, evil players, they can actually reveal where they're located at on the map, and then they can flag themselves for combat to corrupted players for an hour at a time and go hunt them down, which is why you don't want to just be a murderous a-hole in Ashes of Creation, because bounty hunters are going to come get your butt. But bounty hunters are bound to the military nodes. Okay? They're also working on, don't know if it'll be out for release, but they're also talking about military nodes having the ability to have arenas where you can go and you can fight, PvP, that kind of thing, without hurting your reputation or becoming corrupted or anything like that. That's something in the works. I don't know if that's going to be available for launch or not. Now, they do talk about that arena would be instanced, but they're also talking about they could do spectators through an interface. To rule over a military node would be to become a mayor, and who gets that would be decided through a last man standing arena style combat. That's how you would become the mayor of a military node. And the last type is a scientific node. This is like artisan, crafting, construction kind of thing. So scholar NPCs are going to be there from the beginning of this node's development. Now, citizens of a leveled up scientific node would be able to fast travel. They'd be able to teleport between other metropolises that are also scientific. Also, airships that provide faster travel. And from what I understand, and what it sounds like to me, with the artisan classes, that's gathering, processing, and crafting, so that's going to be a major focus for a scientific node. So if we take a look at all four of these different kinds of basic nodes, the divine, the economic, the military, and the scientific, it basically covers religion under divine, faith, and skill and equipment augments, so being able to augment your gear and your skills with the divine node. It's going to have temples in it, and even within this one node type, the different religions have a competition between each other. So it's very complicated, but we basically have the religion under the divine nodes. We have the economics, so trading and auction house, that kind of thing with the economic. With the military, we have combat, PvP, bounty hunters, all that kind of thing. Then with the scientific, we have crafting and processing and gathering. So what this does is it allows you to decide how the world around you is shaped and how your server is going to be different than the other servers, because depending on which nodes are leveled up and focused on and get the most attention, the most people doing quests and, doing the bounty hunter quest for military, or doing a lot of gathering for the scientific, or whatever it is for that specific node that it focuses on, doing a lot of that is going to cause that node to expand and get better and grow and have more options, more quests, more things to do. And then you also have to factor in that there are 15 castle nodes attached to these 103 other various of the 4 type nodes, and those are going to grow depending on the nodes around them. So as people are doing activities in that region, they're helping grow that castle. However, by growing that particular castle town, you are actually depleting from a nearby linked node system, and with its own castle attached to those nodes. So you're deciding where the major cities are, where the metropolises are, which will ultimately decide where people go trade for auction houses, etc., because it's going to have more resources, it's going to be bigger, it's going to have more things to do there. So every server will be different depending on which of those 15 is actually getting the attention on that server, which will cause people to actually research, as the game's been out for a while, like I like to do this activity, what server is really big on this so I can join that server, etc. Of course, as time goes on, these things will be tempted to be changed, and castles can be sieged and completely decimated by opposing guild or guilds or alliance of guilds in order to bring it down quicker, in order for them to get the resource, everything they need to grow their node. So it's pretty cool. It's actually a very revolutionary idea, and it's what definitely sets Ashes of Creation apart from other MMOs coming out. Now, there are technically 9 playable races in the game, but you know, they're broken up this way. So there are 2 different types of human races. There are 2 different races for the dwarves, 2 different races for the orcs, and 3 races for the elves. Now let's talk a little bit about the various classes that will be in the game. So they start out being an archetype, right? Such as the tank. We all know what a tank is. There's a mage, we know what that is. A fighter, a cleric, a rogue, summoner, ranger, and bard. Now, as you progress this archetype, which is your primary class, you have the opportunity to choose a secondary archetype, and you can basically augment the primary skills with effects from the secondary or secondary class. Now, when you combine these two, when you have your primary and your secondary, that's what this game is actually calling a class, and there is a lot of them. So the example given by Ashes of Creation is that if a fighter were to choose mage as a secondary archetype, the fighter would become a spell sword. So this opens up augments that can be applied to skills in that skill tree. Fighters have a rush skill, for example, allows them to rush towards the target, and upon reaching the target, deal an amount of damage with a chance to knock the target down. A mage's escape augment could be applied to that rush skill, which would now teleport the player to the target, thus eliminating the charge time on the skill. So you mix and match and you combine these different skills to create new skills, which is also a very ambitious thing to do. So there are, under each category, basically you can see here this chart where you can match them up. So you can start at the left and say a rogue and a tank, and you can kind of match that up with what class that would be, or vice versa. So lots of options as far as classes go, and a lot of diversity. Now, even the skills within that primary tree that we were talking about have several augment options, and this is how they're approaching horizontal progression. You get skill points as you level up, and you use these skill points to level up your options in the skill tree. And they do state it will not be possible, however, to max all skills in a skill tree, so you do have to pick and choose and make a decision. Now, out of all these different classes, there's actually 64 different possibilities as far as what class you are, and add on top of that the fact that then you have to decide which skills to invest your points into, and you have a wide range of options. And then let's take that on top of the fact that in Ashes of Creation, 8 players that have the same primary archetype can band together and create what's called monumental effects during a siege. I'm going to explain what a siege is in just a minute, but first let's talk about what a monumental effect is. First of all, you'll have to be in the same group or raid to do this. So I'm going to give a couple of examples here, right? So for example, 8 summoners come together. They can collaborate to summon larger summons, such as golems, which is a huge, ridiculous siege summon. We're talking gargantuan size, and the size depends on how many summoners are doing it. So it could be a maximum of 8, but it could be lesser, and it would just be less in size. So the party leader, who would have to be a summoner, right, because you have to be in the same party, initiates a summon, and then takes control of that summon. Now, there can be other people in the party who aren't summoners, but if all 8 of them are summoners, you get the bigger summon. So there could be 4, and you would get half that size. Do you understand what I mean? So next up would be like a tank, right? So say if 8 tank archetypes each use one of their summon wall abilities, it would construct a huge wall that could actually divide 2 raids and would take a lot to fell that down. So now let's talk a little bit about what a siege is. So this is so players can destroy a node. This is so that they could pave way for new development, or maybe they're trying to purposefully break it down so they can open up locked content in a surrounding node. Of course, it's going to get political, there's going to be a lot of intrigue, and it's going to get crazy real life world where everybody doesn't agree, right? But that's an important part of the game, is that these things happen. Now, it's not easy to siege a node, and you might even own a home in that node, so you do not want it to be destroyed and you'll want to defend it. But once it's declared, and it can be declared by any player, that this node is under siege, as long as that player completes the prerequisites for the siege initiation. During this period of declaration, individuals or guilds can also go ahead and register that they're going to attack the siege or the node as well. Now, there's there's a particular time that has to be declared within. And so far they're saying it'll probably be between 4 p.m. and 9 p.m. on that server's local time. So first of all, you have to get a specific item that's required through a quest that scales in difficulty, of course, depending on the level of the node. So if it's a very high level or max level node, it's going to be very difficult and a very hard item to acquire, a very hard quest. But once that item is brought to the node and activated, the declaration period begins and a countdown is initiated for people in the region to see. Now this countdown will run for a number of days equal to the level of the node being sieged. So the bigger the level of the node, the more time you have to see that it's under siege, etc., and make your decision. But once that countdown is complete, the siege begins. A lot of the services in that node are shut down and not available and are replaced with preparation quests or services to partake or help in that siege. And you can no longer move goods out of the depositories within the node, so this makes players have to contribute to the defense of the city. It also elevates the need for the city to politically gain allies among the other nodes so they can protect the collective goods of the city. Now during the siege alliance, or during this siege, there could be alliances formed among the attackers and the defenders. If you're a citizen of that node, then you're automatically registered as a defender. Now there are lots of reasons they want to give you in order to want to participate in these sieges, such as titles, items, materials, money, and of course social bonds. Now if you do not register to become an attacker or a defender of this node siege, you cannot participate. And even if you're a low-level character, you can still have usefulness in these sieges, such as taking control of a siege weapon, helping repair fortifications, bringing buffs, using stealth to scale walls. Now the siege itself takes over several different phases, and during a siege you do not get flagged with the PvP and become a corrupted or evil player by doing this. Now from what I understand, the objectives during the siege are that each part, depending on how big that node is, it could be separated into districts, which has a raid boss or a guard NPC in each district that you have to take over. And once you take over a district, that district becomes a place where you and the other attackers can respawn. And there's lots of mechanics to taking over, such as assaulting outposts of the attackers to hinder them from being able to defend as well. And the siege itself lasts for up to 2 hours. If you want to defend that node, you'll be required to hold the central point in the node. Attackers will need to remove the defenders' flags and raise their own. If the node survives, there will be a cooldown before the node can be sieged again, and that cooldown depends on the level of the node. So for a village, they say 20 days. For a town, 30 days. For a city, 40 days. For a metropolis, 50 days. If the node still exists after the siege is ended, you will still have to go out and get the resources needed so you can rebuild all the damaged walls and buildings, etc. Now, a node cannot be destroyed from the very beginning. It has to at least get to level 3, which is a village, before it can even be destroyed or a siege can be declared upon it. So this brings about a lot of questions, such as destructible environments. Yes, the game will have destructible environments. It's actually a very core piece of the world building of this game, is that things can be built and they can be torn down. Now you gotta remember, you're gonna have to defend a node with your life if your house is there, because you don't want to just lose your house because it can be completely destroyed during a siege. However, things such as decorations and your furnishings, those are retained and you get to keep those. You can just place them down, you just gotta find a new home basically. Now, let's say that you survive a siege. This node can now be redeveloped because things may have changed, right? It may be now different races are now the primary contributors, or maybe even different governments now. So whether the siege survives or it doesn't, it's going to still change the dynamic of that entire area, because either the damage that has been done and now has to be built back up and recover from that, or because it's under a new government and therefore could change the entire outcome of what that node is actually even going to be for. So as you might assume, different servers are going to be doing different decisions with different people with different outlooks and different things they want to do, different guilds, and of course that means that it's going to be like almost like a totally different world if you enter another server, because it will have metropolises in different places, nodes will be specialized on different things, etc. So as far as trying to create an ever-changing, evolving world that never feels static, I think Ashes of Creation has that on lockdown. Let's talk a little bit about the leveling in Ashes of Creation. So leveling it's very important to the developers. It doesn't follow a linear path, although it does have some very classic MMO mechanics that you're probably used to. For leveling, experience is gained through a variety of activities, such as PvP, PvE, exploration, gathering, processing, and crafting, or events and quests. So let's begin with PvP. So, as we just discussed with Sieges, PvP is what they call the catalyst for change. They've designed it, as you just heard me explain, to be meaningful. It can be caravan battles as you're moving supplies, open world conflicts fought for cities, or it could just be a murderous guy out in the woods, which there's big penalties for, and let's talk a little bit about that. Let's say you just have some guy who wants to greet people. He wants to go around and he just wants to kill low levels and that kind of thing. How will Ashes of Creation control that kind of behavior, right? First of all, it has a flagging system that is designed specifically to deter people from griefing others. So all players start as non-combatant greens. Attacks such as what they call non-force, like an AoE, will not hit a non-combatant player. But if you attack another player, you become a combatant, which is a purple player. At that point, such as entering an open world battlefield where you'll automatically be flagged as a combatant for being there, or if you simply just attack another player. But so will the person who tries to fight back. If you're non-combatant but you decide you're going to heal or buff or otherwise interact with a combatant, you also will be flagged as a combatant. Non-combatants who attack a player using combat pets or any other player-controlled entities will also be flagged as combatants. A player can kill a combatant without repercussions and are actually encouraged to do that. And when you die as a combatant, it has a very reduced death penalty. Now let's talk about Corrupt, which is a red player, or an evil person. If a combatant player kills a non-combatant player, they are flagged as corrupt. Corruption multiplies your death penalties and reveals a corrupt player's location to bounty hunters that we talked about earlier. And if you don't think people will play as bounty hunters, oh boy will they ever. Also, a player's corruption score increases with each non-combatant player killed, so it gets worse, and so do the penalties. If a non-combatant attacks a corrupt player, the non-combatant will not flag as a combatant because it's totally legal to kill a corrupt player. Now, corrupted players can fight and could even kill bounty hunters, and they do not get additional corruption score because those two are meant to face off against each other. Now, if you want your AoEs to hit flag players, there's a checkbox you have to click in order to do that, because they don't want you to accidentally become a combatant because you're just doing your AoEs and somebody random walks by, right? So that has to actually be turned on. Now, there are PvP systems in the game, such as the Sieges and the Caravans, and even Guild Wars, which I haven't talked about, that does not use the flagging system because that's allowed PvP. So I've talked about everything but the Guild Wars, so let's discuss that briefly. Although at this particular time, it's still a little bit design stage and testing. The goal is for Guild Wars to be objective-based with great risk for each side. So, such as objectives spawning in the world based on the level of the Guild War and the assets available to the guilds, such as a guild hall or a guild fortress. It might be related to catching a quest item in or around the guild hall, or to steal a quest item that the guild may have received from completing a raid, or bounty objectives to kill a particular guild member. But no matter what, there will be such mechanics in place, such as a war declaration period between the guilds, objective-based components, victory and surrender conditions. Guilds are able to war with multiple guilds or alliances at a time, and guild wars operate outside of the PvP flagging system, as we mentioned earlier. Now, also, I want to mention that Ashes of Creation will have dungeons and raids, and I want to real quickly, briefly touch on those as well. There will be open world dungeons, so that multiple groups can facilitate the same dungeon. 80% of their dungeons will be open world, so the mass majority of them will be, which if you know me, you know I love open world dungeons. But, however, there will also be instance dungeons to cater for solo and group quest lines. Roughly 20% of the dungeons will be instanced. Now, dungeon difficulty increases the further a player ventures into the dungeon. So in an open world dungeon, the further and deeper you go, the more difficult it will get. Mobs and mob mechanics will become more difficult. Terrain and environmental dangers will also increase. While I'm on the subject of open world, it is worth mentioning that the entire game is a seamless open world experience with no loading times or loading screens between regions. There are even open world raids, and instancing is only for certain dungeons where they want a narrative appeal for a quest or something like that. So outside of those, it's open world. Now let's talk a little bit about raids. So raids are either by a triggered event or a more traditional system. So there is traditional world bosses, but those do change based on the node development, which will give reason for people to actually, for the server to change over time, is to open up new raids that are only available by certain node types being leveled up, which means others must be leveled down. And they want the raids to be a little different every single time, so they want it to have enough variables that it can't be completely planned for. But the interesting part is, like we said before, the nodes is changing it to actually achieve that content and what nodes are surrounding that particular piece of content in order to actually influence and change what mobs and mechanics are in that raid. But we are talking about what you would expect with raids, with multiple phase boss fights, ads, skill usage, telegraphed animations, even though they did say they don't want it to be very obvious, like big giant flashy things on the ground. But the fights will require location, mobility, and strategy. But they want the telegraphs, by the way, to be more of like animation based. And what's cool about it is that you can get these trophies that actually go into that respective town, city, or metropolis node in order to actually have your name of the people the first to complete a world boss or dungeon bosses or raid bosses, to actually say those names of those characters in what they call a trophy park, which is a place inside of a town, city, or metropolis where it mentions that information. Of course, this makes us wonder about looting, which it uses very traditional loot-based systems, such as Loot Master with the Master Looter, Round Robin, where you take turns, Need Before Greed, based on dice rolls, a bidding system, which is an interesting one, which allows players to bid on the items instead of rolling for them, and the highest bidder wins the item. Then the gold goes into a pool that's split amongst the rest of the party members. And that, my friends, is a very decent overview of what Ashes of Creation is all about, what direction this MMORPG is going for, and I think it's pretty cool. It's definitely very high production. It's coming along real nice, as you can tell from the videos that I put within this video, where you can kind of see how the game's coming along, and it's looking really good so far. And as of the time of this recording, best I could find out, it looks like Ashes of Creation is shooting for a release date of 2022. They're expected to do a lot of heavy beta testing in 2021, and then they believe a year of that, they should probably be able to get the game out. So, let me know in the comments down below what you think about all these systems, the node system, the class system, the augmenting of abilities, and all the things I talked about in this video. What's your opinion on it? Is this a game you're looking out for? Is it on your radar? Are you excited about this MMO? Let me know in the comments down below. And of course, if you're not already subscribed, please consider doing so, as this is what we do here on the channel, is talk about MMORPGs. Although I specialize in Pantheon Rise of the Fallen, I do talk about all the major MMOs coming out that I think are interesting or could have a real decent shot at being a world we want to live in. Also, if you're a super fan of the Nathan Napalm and you want to support or help this channel, please consider clicking the join button down below in order to become a member with special perks. And of course, until next time guys, God bless and happy gaming. Please listen to what I say. I've been making videos all day. It's a video buffet, you can even hit replay. But please just subscribe, I can't even describe being part of my tribe. I'll even offer you a prize, but just please just subscribe and hit the bell notification too.